The notice sat on the polished granite countertop like a piece of stained parchment evidence. I stared at the $650 fine and felt the blood drain out of my face instantly. It was for wildflowers. Wildflowers. My husband had planted with his own hands just 3 years before he died. I remember that Tuesday so clearly. The sun was beating down on Willow Creek Estates, a brutal midsummer kind of heat. Everything here felt too perfect, too manicured by the HOA. They sold this illusion of controlled suburban perfection, and I paid for it with my mortgage payments every single month. Mark loved color. He loved chaos in a beautiful way. When he passed from that terrible flu last fall, everything settled into this quiet dust cloud where vibrant life used to be. I had kept his garden patch going as best I could. It was near the back fence line bordering the common green space. Mark insisted on it despite the strict guidelines. He called it our little rebellion against beige conformity. The bed was a riot of purple coneflowers, yellow black-eyed susans, and clumps of deep red salvia. It was beautiful, frankly, an unruly masterpiece that spoke volumes about a man who refused to live in a postcard. I had watered them every morning even when my hands felt too shaky or my energy reserves were critically low. I treated it like one last conversation with him. Then came the afternoon the HOA representative arrived. A woman named Brenda. She wore khaki shorts that looked aggressively pristine and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She carried a clipboard as if it contained state secrets. She didn't even bother with pleasantries. She just pointed at my flower bed with the tip of a laminated finger. "Mrs. Davies," she said. The way she pronounced my name suggested I was dusty furniture. "We have received multiple complaints regarding unapproved landscaping." I stood up slowly from the kitchen chair. "Unapproved how?" My voice felt rusty, unused. Brenda tapped her pen against the clipboard rhythmically. "The covenanters of Willow Creek Estates are very specific. All plantings must adhere to approved low-maintenance native grasses or non-invasive annuals. These specimens," she waved a dismissive hand toward the colorful mess, "are entirely unauthorized. They are considered invasive ornamental flora." I felt a sharp spike of heat in my chest that had nothing to do with the Arizona sun. "They are wildflowers. It doesn't matter what you call them," she countered smoothly. "The governing documents state clear guidelines. You need to remove them immediately or face escalating fines." Escalating fines. $650 was just the opening volley. I knew that tone. It meant a pattern of sustained annoyance coupled with financial leverage. They weren't enforcing beauty, they were enforcing compliance in my dwindling bank account. I argued with her. I tried appealing to sentimentality. I told her Mark planted them, remembering his grandmother's garden out in Georgia. She just adjusted her sunglasses and recited policy like it was scripture. "It is not about sentiment, Mrs. Davies. It is about maintaining property values and adherence to the CC&Rs. I left that day feeling cornered. The notice arrived a week later, formal and chillingly polite, detailing the initial fine. I paid it because arguing with bureaucracy feels like running into a wall made of very expensive laminated policy documents. The next month brought a second, higher assessment. They claimed the root system was degrading the property's structural integrity. It was ludicrous. The flowers had roots, they were not building tunnels under my patio. I started spending late nights in the dusty attic. I wasn't looking for tax returns or old Christmas cards. I was looking for paper. Anything that smelled of forgotten agreements or legal boilerplate. Mark used to joke about lawyers and dusty documents. He called it archaeological work. There, tucked inside a box labeled the State Records Miscellaneous, I found it. A thick manila folder sealed with yellowed adhesive tape. It was marked Original Deed Conveyances and Covenanters. My heart started beating hard against my ribs, the kind of panicked rhythm you hear right before something huge happens. This wasn't just the neighborhood rules, this felt foundational. I sat at the dining table, spreading out the documents under the harsh glare of the overhead light. The first few pages were standard stuff, plat maps, signatures, dates. Then I hit a section bound with brittle red string titled Supplemental Agreement, Addendum, Gamma. It was dense legalese written in faded ink from the late 70s. It detailed covenanters related to common area maintenance and aesthetic guidelines for Willow Creek estates. I scanned past clauses about acceptable lawn height until my eye snagged on something underlined. Underlined twice. The covenant specified rules regarding structures' usage of utility easements and permitted landscaping materials. But near the bottom, in smaller type, was a footnote reference. It referenced Section 4B, subsection I, regarding natural habitat preservation. My breath hitched. I found the section. It didn't mention grass height or color palettes. It spoke about preserving established naturalized areas deemed critical to local biodiversity, a designation that had required signatories from the County Planning Commission. And right there in the fine print of that covenant, it stipulated an exception clause for any planting originating from seeds carried over by the original founding families, designated founding beneficiaries. Mark's family. My husband sighed. They were one of those names listed. The HOA bylaws, the beautiful, pristine document Brenda used to wield like a weapon, completely ignored this addendum. The supposed authority they operated under was built on an oversight or perhaps a willful blindness regarding the Solder Agreement. Their current rules only governed new development, not remediation of established natural features protected by deeper covenanters. I read it 3 times slow and steady until the words finally settled into undeniable truth in my mind. They had no standing to fine me for what was legally designated as a preserved feature associated with the original deed holders. The realization didn't bring elation or shouts. It brought a cold, precise kind of power. The knowledge that I held an invisible lever beneath their immaculate facade of control. I went back to the counter later that evening. Brenda wasn't there, but Mr. Harrison, the HOA board president, was visiting. He had that oily veneer of over-patronization about him. He was sipping iced tea and talking loudly enough for me to hear about the difficulty of property management in an age of carelessness. Honestly, Mrs. Davies, he sighed dramatically, some people just don't respect the collective effort it takes to keep this community pristine. I kept my voice even measured, almost conversational. I didn't challenge him directly about the flowers. I let the silence build until he prompted me with a little chuckle. "Are you going to get those weeds cleared up, Mrs. Davies?" he asked. It was an implied threat again. I reached into the pocket of the jeans I wore that day. My fingers brushed against the thick manila folder. I didn't open it. I just placed it gently on the granite counter between us. The red string seemed to gleam in the hallway light. "Mr. Harrison," I began. "Before we discuss weeding or maintenance fees, perhaps you could direct me back to Section 4B, subsection I, of the original deed conveyance addendum Gamma." His smile froze instantly. His casual posture snapped rigid like a board refusing to bend. He glanced at the folder and then at me, his eyes searching for an exit strategy, a weak deflection. "I'm not familiar with that addendum, Mrs. Davies," he stammered, sounding suddenly much older than his expensive polo shirt suggested. "Of course you are," I said softly, looking him directly in the eye. "Because it dictates the parameters of your entire authority here. And because Mark and my family were listed as founding beneficiaries, the protection afforded to that area supersedes any general covenant drafted later." The color drained from his face so fast it was almost visible. He looked less like an arbiter of property values and more like a man whose foundations had just given way. He stood up, knocking his chair slightly askew. "This is a misunderstanding," he mumbled already, backing away toward the entryway as if I were contaminated. "I need to check our records." And then he was gone into the overly polished hallway, leaving me in the quiet echo of my own hard-won silence. The next morning, the phone rang before the sun had properly risen. It wasn't a threat. It was an apology wrapped in layers of corporate panic. They didn't call to dispute. They called to negotiate avoidance. They confirmed that the fine for the Wildflowers was rescinded immediately due to unforeseen conflicting covenanters which required board review. It took weeks of polite correspondence and carefully worded documents proving my due diligence, but the money stayed unspent. The flowers remained. I didn't yank them out. I trimmed back only what was dangerously close to the property line, leaving the heart of the wild bed exactly as Mark had wanted it. Sometimes justice isn't a dramatic confrontation or a lawsuit that ends with lawyers shaking hands amicably.